ended up recording it saying, that's Scott, and I get a text. You know what I mean? That's history there. So Scott, you know, he the man. That's who they pay to see.
Last week, you mentioned that the referees are quickly pull the trigger.
Yeah, I'm done with them. I'm done with the refs.
Talk about how special it was.
Not to.
No,
I'm done with those guys.
I mean, it's just different now. I really appreciate guys like Joey Crawford, Monty, and Dick when those guys was reffing, man. You really appreciate those guys when you got them, man. So I'm lost for words. I wasn't expecting to get a technical like that because I wasn't saying anything towards the ref, and I wasn't saying anything that should have got me a tech.
I don't know what else I can watch. I don't really talk to them much anymore. So, no, I don't know what else to watch at this point. Just continue to be me. Hey, if I get tech, so be it. Continue to be me.
Rising tensions between the players and the referees has been a growing topic here over the course of the season. Yesterday here in LA, a small group of players met with a small group of referees to sort of hash out their differences and talk about potential solutions to the issue. But when Draymond Green emerged from the meeting, somebody asked him, you know, what he learned from it and what steps will be taken moving forward. And he said, quote, "I'm not sure." So I don't know if we really got anywhere with this, but what stands out to you about the interactions this season that's different?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of incidents. I mean, look, there's always been technicals. There's always been sort of back and forth with officials for, you know, in the NBA. But this year, just the amount of players complaining and upset and technicals and just it's something that we really haven't seen. And so it is a little bit alarming. I don't necessarily know the reason why for that, but I am at least somewhat encouraged that they're recognizing both sides, that it's an issue and something that needs to be fixed, and they're willing to sit and talk. Not that everything will be resolved in one meeting, but I'm hoping that get to a point where this doesn't become a distraction. We can focus in on the great storylines, the greatness of our players and the teams in the NBA, and not talk about the unhealthy discourse between the players and the officials.
Commissioner Adam Silver is on his way to the set literally right now. We're going to ask him about this, but he said yesterday the data shows that there's really not much change in terms of technicals, etc., but there's clearly a perception amongst the players that they can't speak to officials the way you guys could during your careers.
Yeah, that's where things have changed the most, because when a ref makes a call and you feel like you've gotten all ball on the foul, you're going to react naturally because you thought it was a good, clean play. The old school, you could go to that ref and ask, did you have the right angle to make that call? Because I thought I got all ball. That's what's missing today versus yesterday, to be able to communicate with one another.
And I think just in terms of the demonstrative attitude or atmosphere that the player sometimes has, you know, sometimes the referees, they got to take a step back, because at the end of the day, what drives this engine is the players, and we have to make sure that Adam Silver, how you doing, sir? we have to make sure that, you know, we are talking more about our players and less about our referees, because that's what drives this engine, and that's what makes this ship go, is the players, and that's what everybody wants to see and talk about and hear. So, you know, Danny Crawford said to me that the best officiated game is the game where we don't even know the officials are there and we get to watch the players play.
You see the 4-point plan released yesterday after that summit. Welcome, Commissioner Adam Silver.
Hello.
To the set. Hi. Good to have you with us.
There's no room at the table for me.
I'm sorry.
Well, we make room for you.
Small table.
Is that tailor-made? Is that Armani? Is that, I mean, that's,
come on.
I mean, you better than Westbrook right now.
Look at you guys. You guys look great.
Westbrook was pretty tame tonight. We just saw that 4-point plan, and it all sounds good. I mean, it's communication. It's an extra channel of communication. It's an understanding of the rules. To me, when I read that, though, I'm not sure it gets at the heart of what seems to be the perception among players, that they can't speak to officials the way they used to, and that's what I'm hearing over and over again. What's your take on that?
Well, you know, these guys know better than anyone, people who play the game. My sense, and I've been around the game for 26 years, is that there's a perception issue, but the actuality isn't that all different from where it's been historically. But having said that, in this case, there is a perception that the lines of communication between players and officials aren't what they once were, and I think that's something we can improve in two ways. One is through better training of the officials. There's no question about it. You have young guys in the league, and in certain cases, I think they maybe aren't sure exactly where the line is in terms of how much communication there should be. And also, I think what players don't realize, especially with young officials, just try it. Try running up and down the floor. You know, you're instructed to be looking in a certain place, making difficult calls, and then try having a conversation with somebody at the same time. And I think some of the young players also don't understand that there's an opportunity to have those conversations with officials, but they have to wait till certain moments. And I think there's also a way for the officials to communicate to a player that, you know, rather than just waving the player off, that there's sort of this notion of there'll be an opportunity to have that discussion. Right. And so I think we can do that through training, but also, you know, I'm encouraged by the fact that players and referees are talking directly to each other, because ultimately it's about respect and empathy. I mean, it's nothing new. Officials have incredibly difficult jobs. Players are under enormous pressure as well, and there needs to be a better understanding. But I'm not that concerned. I mean, these are all issues that we can address.
Well, you mentioned the data, and it shows that the technical fouls are roughly where they have been. What for you then was the tipping point that made you want to initiate this summit along with Michelle Roberts of the Players Association and say, okay, we should get these parties together?
You know, it's interesting. It wasn't so much of a tipping point, but a desire to improve things. And I think it's something we've been focused on the last few years. For example, over the course of this season, now with Monty McCutcheon, who came off the floor to oversee our referee training, and he was the #1 rated official out there and always was known for great relationships with players and coaches. He's taking with him crews of officials and meeting with all 30 teams during the season. Historically, we only did that, as you guys know, preseason. Right. But and part of it, at the end of the day, there's 64 officials in the league, and the players get to know them better. And, you know, as we've said, and I know coaches say it to players, if you want to say something to an official by saying, Bill, as opposed to, hey, you, it makes a big difference. They're all human beings, and I think part of it is we get more officials out there outside the setting of the game to have direct conversation with players, to share with them what their concerns are, have players share back to the officials how they perceive things. I know we can improve it. So it was less a tipping point, but a desire to improve those relationships.
I think you hit on a really important point just in terms of communication norms. Like, when do you have time, or when do you find that important time to get your point across? And we as players, we always knew that we can talk to the referee, you know, doing a foul shot, taking it out of bounds. But those were unspoken norms that you just kind of like, you know, understood. And I think maybe this generation of referees and probably officials haven't really, you know, completed that unspoken norm of training that you want to bring in and say, okay, this is when you have time to have the conversation. And another thing I want to shift to and pivot to is you've taken a bold stance in terms of gambling. And you've spoke about, you know, gambling, and the NBA, the NFL is looking at gambling right now. Can you talk a little bit about how that affects our game, and some of the regulations and rules that you may want to put around it to ensure that, you know, the game keeps the sanctity and sacredity of it?
Sure. So what I've spoken out about publicly is the fact that we should have regulated sports betting nationally, not just, for example, in Las Vegas, where, of course, you can go in and there are sports books and casinos, and you can bet on NBA games or any major league sports games. And ultimately, I concluded, because we know, especially with all the betting that's on the internet now, there's estimates out there that there are, just the United States, hundreds of billions of dollars being bet on sports in the U.S. And none of that can be monitored because it's all illegal in essence. And you can go online, if you Google various betting sites, most of them are offshore. The data is not available to the leagues. If there's odd behavior or individuals who are betting enormous amounts on games, it's not transparent in any way to us. So rather than necessarily my being pro-sports betting, I feel I'm more a realist on this issue and saying, if we know it's going to go on anyway, let's regulate it. By the way, it's an opportunity for the states. They're all trying to raise additional revenue. But more importantly, from the league standpoint, we can protect the integrity of our game by having access to that data. And I don't want to shy from the fact that it's a business opportunity as well. The fact is that we spend billions of dollars producing this product, and that it's something, and we and the team owners and the players, of course, share in the revenue. And if people are taking our intellectual property and using it as content, using it to place wagers on, we should be their partners. So it's two sides of the same coin. I think there's an integrity issue and there's a business issue related to it.
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah,
I really do.
Excuse me, Adam. We were talking up here earlier, and certainly one of the storylines this week is NBA players and social activism. And unlike other sports commissioners, you have really embraced players, coaches, members of the league speaking out and using their platform. Could you talk about that?
You know, it's interesting you're asking that question, Grant, because, of course, you were on stage last night talking about NBA voices and players expressing themselves. And, in fact, Michelle Roberts and I just talked to the All-Stars a few minutes ago before I came out here. And one of the things we said to them in response to a little bit of the controversy in the media right now is that, number one, we both support you. Your Players Association, the league, supports you in using your voices on important issues. I think it's important that our fans understand these are multi-dimensional people. They aren't just basketball players. It's not just about dribbling a basketball. They're citizens, they're husbands, they're fathers, they're members of communities. In addition, many of them from outside the United States. 25% of our league is international. They have important perspectives on issues too. And by the way, many of them come from countries where they can't speak out on issues that are important to them. So that's number one issue. Number two, Bill Russell is here this weekend. He's going to be sitting courtside tonight. And one of the things I mentioned to the players, and I know they know this, is that, and you guys are pioneers in this as well, that when you came into the league, you knew there was a legacy of speaking out on important issues, of standing for important things in your communities. And here's Bill Russell. I just point out to the players, and I said it the other day, if you go back and look at the Martin Luther King's iconic I Have a Dream speech in the summer of 1963, that year, he was the MVP of the All-Star game here in L.A. He then went on to win the championship for the Celtics. But then that August, he was standing in Washington, D.C. You can see the pictures. He's on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial while Dr. King is giving that speech. So it's nothing new. But the only thing that's really changed now, and it's great that the players have this platform through the internet. Incidentally, people might forget LeBron's comments came on a site that he created with Maverick Carter, uninterrupted. So this is players taking matters into their own hands, creating platforms that have millions of followers, and then even if it begins on their platform, but if it's something newsworthy, then other sites report on it. So I think it's fantastic, and people don't have to agree with everything they're saying, and I'm comfortable with people disagreeing as well, and I don't agree with everything the players say, but it's about the platform, and it's the opportunity to express themselves.
Well, speaking of platforms, I want to thank you, because now this Players Only is taking on its own platform.
This is a one-issue candidate.
Magic and Isaiah.
We gave him talking points. He sticks to the talking points.
We got Shaq and
Players Only, baby.
There you go. There you go. I got it. I didn't have to say it. You said it for me. Do you like it? Are you enjoying it?
What do they say? Long-time fan, long-time listener, whatever. Yeah, of course I love it. And, it's going from NBA TV, moving on to TNT now. Yes. And for fans who haven't followed it, it's a great experience to hear Players Only talking about the game from their perspective. And Kevin Garnett was in the other day. He's loving it. It's great to hear his voice.
You know how rapidly technology changes the way we consume the NBA and so many other forms of entertainment. What do you think this is going to look like 10 years from now? How differently will fans be consuming the NBA in a decade?
It's a great question, and trying to make a prediction about a decade from now, think about it. The iPhone was only launched roughly 10 years ago.
Right. Yeah, wow.
Isn't that incredible? And if you look at the most valuable companies in the world right now, in essence, Google/Alphabet, or Facebook, or Twitter, or Amazon, these were companies that weren't really around 20 years ago. And so that's how difficult it is to make these sort of predictions. But I will say, in terms of virtual reality, I know some of you guys have seen some of these tests as well. To me, it potentially provides enormous opportunity for this league, because you all do things internationally. And the fact is that 99% of our fans will never be in the United States or Canada, let alone come to an NBA arena. And to the extent through virtual reality, we can in essence take the games to them. And for people who haven't tried it, right now it's a little bit clunky. It's with goggles. You sit down, but you're in the arena. You're courtside. And what we've always said, I think people accept, even who aren't as diehard NBA fans that the best seat in all of sports is a courtside seat in an NBA game. That if you take somebody, even if they're a big football fan or whatever, if you put them in a courtside seat, they say, oh my God, I didn't realize the guys were so big and powerful and fast and they're flying through the air and all that. But then if you put on those virtual reality glasses and all of a sudden you are courtside and we can replicate that experience for hundreds of millions of people around the world. Think of what that opportunity is. And by the way, then the next step, it's not just replicating courtside, you can take them on the court and they can be flying through the air and they can be in the locker room and all kinds of other places.
Wild. Tough to even imagine what it's going to look like years from now. Great to have you with us as always.
Thanks, guys.
The commissioner of the NBA, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Players only, baby. You made my weekend. You made my weekend. Yes, man. You made my weekend.